In the history of war, men have prayed for escape from Auschwitz. They have begged, stolen, and died trying to get out. Only one man in all of human history, prayed to get in. His superiors called it madness. His friends called it suicide. But in the late summer of 1940, a 39-year-old cavalry officer and father of two did the unthinkable. He walked calmly into a Warsaw street, knowing an SS roundup was imminent, and allowed himself to be captured. Why? Why would any sane human being volunteer for hell on earth? This is not just a story of survival. It is a story of infiltration, resistance, and a secret so terrible that the world refused to believe it. This is the story of Captain Witold Pilecki, the man who broke into Auschwitz. When Poland fell to the Blitzkrieg in 1939, Witold Pilecki, had every reason to disappear. He was a soldier, yes, but he was also a husband and a father. He could have fled. He could have hidden at his estate. He could have, like so many, simply tried to survive. But that was not his way. Almost immediately, he co-founded one of the first resistance organizations, the secret Polish army, the Tajna Armia Polska. They operated in the shadows of occupied Warsaw, a city suffocating under the swastika. By the 1940s, a new name had begun to circulate in the underground. A camp. Konzentrationslager Auschwitz. At first, it was just a name. A place where the SS sent political prisoners, intellectuals, priests, resistance members. Rumors began to trickle out. Whispers of starvation, of brutal beatings, of casual executions. But they were just that, whispers. The resistance needed to know the truth. They needed eyes inside. At a meeting, the subject was raised. How can we find out what is really happening in there? Silence. Then a voice. Witold's. I will go. His superiors thought he was insane. The risk was absolute. The chance of success? Zero. But Pilecki was resolute. He argued that the value of the intelligence was worth any price, even his life. He believed that if he could just show the world what was happening, the Allies would be forced to act. He was a man of profound, unshakable faith. Faith in his mission, faith in his country, and, most tragically, faith in the conscience of the world. He spent weeks meticulously planning his own capture. He created a false identity. Tomasz Serafiński. He said goodbye to his family, telling them only that he was leaving for a special assignment, knowing he would likely never see them again. Then, on September 19th, 1940, he went to a Warsaw apartment where he knew a łapanka, a random SS street roundup, was scheduled to take place. The show began immediately, the SS guards screaming, the dogs barking, the confused and terrified prisoners herded like cattle. They were stripped of their clothes, their possessions, their names. Their heads were shaved. They were given striped rags. Witold Pilecki ceased to exist. In his place was inmate 4859. He had entered the gates of hell. Now he had to get to work. The purpose of Auschwitz, Pilecki quickly learned, was not just imprisonment. It was dehumanization. Every second of every day was engineered to strip a person of their identity. The show don't tell principle was in full effect. The SS didn't just tell you that you were worthless, they showed you. They showed you with the music that played as work details marched out at dawn, a grotesque parody of civilization. They showed you with the soup, a watery, putrid liquid with rotting vegetables. They showed you with the 12-hour work days hauling stones or building new barracks, often until you collapsed. And if you collapsed, you were beaten. If you couldn't get up, you were killed. This was the pacing of the camp, a relentless, crushing rhythm of despair. And then there was Block 11, the death block, Pilecki described it in his first reports as a state within a state. It was the camp's prison. Here, prisoners were starved to death in standing-only cells or shot at the starvation war. It was in the basement of Block 11 in September 1941 that Pilecki witnessed a terrible experiment. The SS brought in 600 Soviet POWs and 250 Polish prisoners. They sealed the windows and vents, and they threw in canisters of a pesticide. Zyklon B. Pilecki, hiding, heard the muffled screams and the scratching at the door. It took 2 days for them all to die. He realized the horrifying truth. This camp wasn't just a place of arbitrary cruelty. It was a laboratory. The SS was perfecting a new method, an industrial method of killing. In this ocean of despair, how do you build trust? How do you organize resistance when the man sleeping next to you might be an informant, desperate for an extra crust of bread? This was Pilecki's genius. He didn't try to build an army. He built a family. He called it the Union of Military Organization, the ZOW. He started with the men he trusted most, doctors, officers, priests, and he used a 5-man system. He would recruit 4 men. Those 4 men knew only him and each other. Then each of them would, if they were able, recruit 4 more men. This created a web of cells. If one man was captured and broke under torture, he could only give up his 5. The rest of the network would remain intact. It was a domino chain built in reverse. The ZOW's mission was twofold. First, humanity. They stole medicine from the SS infirmary and smuggled it to the sick. They redirected food from camp kitchens. They passed messages. They kept a pacing of hope alive. Their job was to remind the prisoners that they were not numbers, they were men. Second, intelligence. Pilecki began smuggling his reports out. It was an incredibly dangerous process. He wrote on stolen scraps of paper. He passed them to sympathetic Polish civilian workers who were allowed in and out of the camp. Those workers gave them to the resistance, who then transmitted them via a secret radio to the Polish government in exile in London. His first dispatches, smuggled out as early as October 1940, were urgent. "Situation in camp is unbearable," he wrote. "Thousands are perishing." He detailed the executions, the starvation, the medical experiments. He gave them the names of the SS guards. He gave them the numbers of the dead. And in London, they read the reports, and they found them. Hard to believe. British intelligence had a file on Auschwitz. They believed it was a brutal, standard-issue prison camp for political dissidents. But Pilecki's numbers, the scale of the killing he was describing, it sounded exaggerated, hysterical, typical Polish panic. One British intelligence officer, Sir John Sinclair, later noted that reports of German atrocities were so common they were often dismissed. The truth was so monstrous it was counterproductive to its own credibility. Pilecki, inside the wire, was screaming for help. The world outside the wire was debating the details, and then, in 1942, everything changed. Pilecki's reports became frantic. The camp was expanding. A new, massive sub-camp was being built, Birkenau. He reported the construction of 4 new, massive buildings. The SS called them bunkers. The prisoners knew them by another name, gas chambers. He described the process. Trains arriving, day and night, not just Poles or Soviets, but Jews from France, from Holland, from Slovakia, from all over Europe. He described how they were told they were being deloused, how they were marched into underground chambers, how the doors were sealed. He wrote, and I quote directly from his report, over 3,000 people were gassed daily. The bodies were burned in new crematoria. There were transports of men, women, and children. They were gassed, and their bodies were burned. The truth was beyond belief. This was it, the Holocaust in real time, documented by an eyewitness. Pilecki wasn't just reporting anymore, he was pleading. He smuggled out a message, a desperate plea to the Allies. "Bomb them," he urged. "Bomb the railway lines leading to the camp. Bomb the gas chambers. Bomb the crematoria." He knew what this meant. He was in the camp. His friends were in the camp. A bomb would almost certainly kill them. But, he argued, it would stop the factory. It would disrupt the industry of death. He was volunteering not only to enter Auschwitz, but to die in Auschwitz, if it would just stop the killing. He had given the world the truth. He had given them a target. He had given them the moral justification. Pilecki's reports, combined with other intelligence, landed on the highest desks in London and Washington, and they were debated. The Allies knew, by late 1942 they knew, but they feared. They feared that bombing the camps would be a military diversion. Their one singular goal was unconditional surrender. Win the war, then deal with the camps. They feared that bombing the camps and the railway lines would kill the very prisoners they were trying to save. It was, they argued, a technical impossibility to hit the gas chambers without hitting the barracks. And they feared, in a dark, unspoken way, that focusing too much on the Jewish problem would alienate their own populations and make the war seem like it was being fought for the wrong reasons. So, in one of the most tragic what-ifs of the 20th century, the Allied High Command made its decision. The request to bomb Auschwitz was denied. The factory would continue to operate. Inside the camp, Pilecki had no idea his pleas had been rejected. All he knew was that no bombs fell, and more trains arrived. The pacing had become frantic. The Zau was in danger. The camp Gestapo was getting closer. They had begun rolling up resistance cells. Pilecki's friends were being captured, taken to Block 11 and tortured. He knew his 5 was compromised. His name was on a list. After 2.5 years, 949 days, his mission had changed. He had failed to stop Auschwitz. Now his only mission was to get out alive, to carry the full report, not in pieces, but the entire story, to the world himself. He had to become the show, don't tell. He would be the witness. On the night of April 26, 1943, he and 2 friends staged one of the most audacious escapes in the camp's history. They had managed to get assigned to the night shift at the camp bakery. During a change of guards, they overpowered an SS man, cut the phone lines, and unlocked the back door. They ran. They ran with only the SS uniforms on their backs, a handful of stolen bread, and the most terrible secret on earth. Alarms blared, searchlights swept the fields, dogs were released. They sprinted for miles, wading through icy rivers to throw the dogs off their scent. They hid in forests by day and ran by night. After 7 days, they stumbled, half dead, into the safe house of a Polish resistance unit. Witold Pilecki was free. He had done the impossible. He had gone into hell, and he had returned. He immediately sat down and wrote his definitive 100-page account. Report W. It was not a plea, it was a testimony, a cold, factual, horrifying indictment. He detailed the command structure, the economic system of plunder, the names of the guilty, and the methods of the murder. He handed it to the Polish Home Army. He fully expected it to be the domino that finally toppled the world's indifference. 8. He then rejoined the fight. He fought in the 1944 Warsaw Uprising, a heroic, tragic battle to free the city, where he was again captured by the Germans and spent the rest of the war in a different POW camp. When the war finally ended in 1945, he emerged a hero. But the story does not end there. Pilecki's powerful ending was not one of triumph. It was one of profound betrayal. 9. He had escaped hell, only to find himself in another one. Poland had not been liberated. It had been occupied, this time by Stalin's Soviet Union. The Polish government in exile he had been reporting to was now irrelevant. A new communist regime, loyal to Moscow, was in power, and this new regime had its own Bloc 11. To them, men like Witold Pilecki, heroes of the independent Polish Home Army, men loyal to a free democratic Poland, were not heroes. They were enemies of the state. They were a threat. His friends begged him to leave the country. He had done enough. He had survived. He refused. He said his fight was not over. He stayed in Poland and began to do the only thing he knew how. He began to gather intelligence. This time, on the Soviet atrocities, the secret arrests, the deportations to Siberia, the execution of Polish war heroes. He was, once again, a spy in his own land. It didn't last long. In 1947, he was caught by the secret police. He was taken to the infamous Mokotów prison, and he was brutally tortured. This is the part of the story that breaks the heart. At his last meeting with his wife, Maria, he managed to whisper to her. He told her about the torture, the broken bones, the ripped-out fingernails. And then he said, Auschwitz was just a game. Read that again. The man who volunteered for Auschwitz, who built a resistance inside a death camp, said the torture he endured at the hands of the new government was worse. His trial was a show, a sham. He was accused of espionage for a foreign power, the very Polish government in London he had been serving his entire life. He was found guilty. The sentence was death. On May 25, 1948, Captain Witold Pilecki was taken to the basement of Mokotów prison and executed with a single shot to the back of the head. His body was dumped in an unmarked mass grave. Our mission is to ensure these stories are never erased. If you believe in this mission, please support us. Like this video to help share his legacy. Subscribe to join us in telling the stories history tried to forget. And in the comments, please tell us which part of Witold's story will stay with you.